Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something massive, a historic, brand new trade agreement just struck between the UK and 6 Gulf states. It's a huge deal, and it's already sparked a ton of conversation across the political and economic spectrums. We're going to break down exactly what this all means, who's involved, and the major debates surrounding the whole thing, using the facts directly from the source material. The goal here is to make these complex international negotiations super clear and accessible, so let's just jump right in. Okay, let's start with the big one because it's a staggering number, £3.7 billion. According to the UK government, that's the estimated value this new trade deal is going to pump into the economy. It's a massive macroeconomic figure, clearly designed to catch your attention and signal a major shift in international commerce. But what does a number like that actually represent in the real world? Let's break it down piece by piece. So, Section 1, the blueprint. Who is in the GCC? Who exactly is the UK partnering with here? Well, the GCC, or the Gulf Cooperation Council, is made up of 6 nations: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. And you know, what's really wild here is the precedent this sets. This isn't just your run-of-the-mill agreement. This actually marks the very first trade deal ever struck between a G7 country and the GCC. It's a total pioneering move on the global stage, setting a whole new standard for trade relations with these 6 powerful states. Moving on to Section 2, the economic promise, tariffs, jobs, and exports. Now here's another huge number for you, £580 million. The government estimates that once this deal is fully implemented, it's going to wipe out an estimated £580 million a year in tariffs from British exports heading into the Gulf region. The core idea behind slashing these tariffs is to make it significantly easier for British firms to expand and partner in the Gulf. And the government absolutely insists this will directly support and even create jobs back home. To kind of bring those massive numbers down to earth for a second, let's look at exactly what kinds of products we're talking about. We're talking about relatable, everyday stuff. Things like cheddar cheese, butter, and chocolate will now have their tariffs totally removed. It's actually a pretty fascinating example of how high-level international trade policies directly affect the flow of everyday grocery items straight from a British farm all the way to the Gulf. And this builds a much larger picture of the UK's current global strategy. This is actually the 3rd major trade agreement locked in by Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government, right on the heels of deals with India and South Korea. Plus, it's worth noting they've recently struck agreements with the US and the EU as well. So you're really seeing a picture of an aggressive push for international economic partnerships spanning across multiple continents. Which brings us to Section 3, a political tug-of-war. Unsurprisingly, both major UK political parties are incredibly eager to claim this as a victory. On one hand, the current Labour government, led by Keir Starmer, is framing this as a huge win for British workers, promising that working people will really feel the benefits in the years ahead through higher wages and more opportunities. But on the flip side, the Conservatives are quick to point out that the negotiations for this exact deal actually began while they were in government. They're calling it another major Brexit opportunity and warning that Labour risks throwing it all away because of what the Conservatives see as Labour's pro-EU stance. So both sides are fiercely leveraging this £3.7 billion agreement to validate their own economic records. To really underscore the current government's unified messaging on this, Business and Trade Secretary Peter Kyle stated, and I quote, "At a time of increased instability, today's announcement sends a clear signal of confidence, giving UK exporters the certainty they need to plan ahead." Chancellor Rachel Reeves also chimed in on this chorus of optimism, basically asserting that the deal is proof they're backing British firms to compete and win globally, noting it's good for jobs, industry, and ultimately consumers. Okay, so the economics look great on paper, right? But that leads us to a pretty critical, unavoidable question. At what cost? We've looked at all these glowing economic promises and the domestic political victory laps, but now we kind of have to abruptly pivot our focus. Because outside of Westminster, watchdogs and rights groups are raising some severe, fundamental concerns about the hidden costs of doing business in the Gulf. Let's get into Section 4, the human rights pushback. Organizations outside of Westminster are arguing that these economic gains come with a massive price tag. The rights group Trade Justice Movement, for instance, has been highly critical of the glaring lack of detail regarding basic protections in this agreement. As they stated directly, this deal, quote, poses serious risks to human rights, labor protections, and climate action. They are fundamentally challenging the idea that a trade deal can just be treated as purely economic without addressing these severe real-world consequences. So let's break down exactly what those red flags are. According to these watchdogs, the concerns basically fall into three deeply troubling categories regarding the GCC's track record. First off, the restricting of press freedom. Second, the use of the death penalty. And third, serious environmental concerns, specifically the high greenhouse gas emissions that stem from these six countries' deeply entrenched oil industries. These aren't just minor footnotes. Critics argue these are structural issues that the trade deal entirely glosses over. To really drive home how frustrated these critics are, consider this super powerful statement released by the trade justice movement on Wednesday. They claim the deal, quote, locks the UK into deeper commercial ties with some of the most repressive governments in the world for economic gains so marginal they barely register. I mean, think about that contrast for a second. The government is loudly cheering about a £3.7 billion victory and £580 million in removed tariffs, while rights groups are calling those exact same gains so marginal they barely register when compared to the profound moral compromises being made. Which leaves us with this final, vital question for you to consider. Does a £3.7 billion economic gain actually outweigh the ethical and environmental costs? We've looked at the whole shebang today, from the promise of tariff-free cheddar and chocolate, to the fierce political tug-of-war, to the really stark warnings from rights groups about press freedom and climate action. The facts from the source material are firmly on the table. Now it's totally up to you to weigh those promised jobs and exports against these severe moral questions. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope mapping this out has helped you understand the complex layers behind the headlines. Keep learning and keep asking the big questions. See you next time.